My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 71 years old, and my own adopted son banned me from his wedding. Before I tell you about how his perfect world, built on my sacrifices, came crashing down around him, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I've always considered myself a simple woman. I lived in the same modest house in Columbus, Ohio, for over 40 years. I worked as a legal secretary until I retired, and my greatest joy, my life's entire purpose, was my son Kevin. I thought I had done a good job. I thought I had raised a good man. It turns out, I had only raised a monster who wore his face. The day my world ended started beautifully. The sun was shining, and I was wearing the dusty rose dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, the one I'd dreamed about since the day I first held him in my arms. I took a taxi to the Whetstone Park of Roses, a stunning venue overflowing with flowers, the kind of place you see in magazines. I could hear the soft melody of a string quartet as I walked towards the entrance, my heart swelling with a mother's pride. At the reception table, a young woman with a clipboard smiled brightly at me. "Name, please." "Eleanor Vance," I said, my own smile just as wide. "I'm the groom's mother." Her smile faltered. She scanned the list, once, then twice. A confused frown creased her forehead. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Could you spell that for me?" I did, my voice a little tighter now. A cold knot was forming in my stomach. She looked up, her expression now one of deep embarrassment. "Ma'am, I am so sorry, but your name isn't here." "That can't be right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There must be a mistake. I'm Kevin Vance's mother." Just then I saw him. My Kevin. He looked so handsome in his tailored black tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled. He was walking towards us, and for a fleeting moment, relief washed over me. He would clear this up. But as he got closer, I saw his face. There was no surprise, no confusion, only a flash of pure, undiluted annoyance. It felt like a punch to the gut. "Mom," he said, and the word was cold, sharp. "What are you doing here?" My voice trembled. "Kevin, honey, my name. It's not on the list. It must be some kind of mix-up." He didn't even look at the hostess. He looked straight at me, his eyes rolling with a contempt so profound it stole the air from my lungs. "Did you really think you'd be invited?" The world went silent. The music, the chatter of guests, it all faded away. The only thing I could see was the face of the little boy I had rescued from a life of loneliness. Now a man looking at me as if I were a stray dog that had wandered into his party. Standing just behind him, his fiancée, Tiffany, had a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She had won. 1,000 emotions swirled inside me. Rage, heartbreak, utter devastation. But none of them showed on my face. Years of keeping a brave face for my son had taught me how to build a wall of calm. I took a deep breath, looked him right in the eye, and gave him a small, serene smile. "I understand," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "I understand perfectly." I turned around, my back straight, and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked with a dignity they had tried to strip from me. Each step away from that garden felt like I was walking away from the life I had known. But as I settled into the back of a taxi, the mask of serenity fell away, replaced by a cold, hard resolution. The woman who had left that wedding was not the same one who had arrived. I pulled out my phone, my hand steady now. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "David, it's Eleanor," I said when my lawyer answered. "Eleanor, I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. How's the wedding?" I looked out the window as the beautiful rose garden disappeared from view. "The wedding was very illuminating," I said. "David, it's time. I want you to start everything we discussed." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sharp intake of his breath. "Are you sure, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm more certain than I've ever been in my life, David." I hung up the phone. To understand the steel that had forged itself in my spine that day, you have to understand the 30 years that came before it. You see, Kevin wasn't born my son, but I chose him. I found him at a county children's home. He was just 3 years old, a tiny, frail thing with eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness in the world. He'd been found abandoned, and I knew from the moment I saw him that my life's purpose was to fill those eyes with happiness. I finalized his adoption and gave him my name, my home, my entire heart. My own dream of opening a small bakery, the one I'd been saving for since I was a girl, was packed away in a box. The money from that savings, my little nest egg, became his college fund. I worked double shifts as a secretary, my fingers aching from typing, my back sore from sitting all day, just so he could attend the best private schools. I packed his lunches, I helped him with his homework, I cheered the loudest at his little league games. I was his everything and he was mine. 4 years, it was perfect. He was a sweet, loving boy. But things began to change, slowly at first, when he met Tiffany in college. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Polished and ambitious, from a family that had money but, as I would learn, very little class. From the very beginning, she looked at me and my modest home with a kind of polite disdain. The first time I felt it, truly felt it, we were at my house for Sunday dinner. I'd made my famous pot roast, the one Kevin had always loved. Tiffany picked at it. "It's a little rustic, don't you think, Kev?" she'd said, wrinkling her nose. "My mother uses a sous vide." Kevin just laughed, a nervous little sound, and changed the subject. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend the meal he'd asked for just a week earlier. That was the first crack in the foundation. The cracks grew wider. The insults became more frequent, always veiled as helpful suggestions. "Oh, Eleanor, that blouse is a bit bright for your age, isn't it?" she'd say with a saccharine smile. The visits became less frequent. The calls became shorter. But the incident that should have been my final warning sign happened about a year before the wedding. I was so excited to finally have a daughter figure in my life. I wanted to share everything with her. I brought over my old family photo albums, the ones with the worn leather covers, filled with pictures of Kevin as a baby, his first steps, his toothless school pictures. I thought she'd love it. I was sitting on the couch between them, pointing out a picture of a 3-year-old Kevin on his first day in my home. I was telling the story, my voice thick with emotion, when Tiffany reached across me to grab her wine glass. Her hand slipped, and a cascade of dark red wine flooded the open page, soaking through the precious, irreplaceable photos. The ink began to bleed immediately. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, but it sounded fake. "I am so clumsy. Eleanor, I think your story just made me so emotional my hands started shaking." Kevin rushed to get paper towels, but the damage was done. The faces of my little boy were now distorted, purplish blurs. "It's okay," I whispered, my heart aching. But it wasn't okay. And the worst part? Kevin looked at me, not her, with a hint of annoyance, as if my precious memories were an inconvenience. He never once considered it might have been intentional. From then on, I was kept at a distance. I found out they were moving in together when I saw the Zillow listing. I found out they got a dog when I saw it on social media. But what broke me, long before the wedding, was their engagement. They didn't call me. They didn't tell me. I decided to pop over one Saturday afternoon with a freshly baked apple pie, his favorite. When he opened the door, I saw a crowd of people behind him. Tiffany's parents, her siblings, her cousins. They were all there, champagne glasses in hand. Tiffany was standing in the middle of the room, flashing a diamond ring the size of a small planet. They all shouted, "Surprise!" But it wasn't for me. They were celebrating, and I was an uninvited guest at my own son's engagement party. I forced a smile, congratulated them, and fled before they could see the tears welling up in my eyes. That was the night I realized I wasn't just losing my son. I had already lost him. I just hadn't been willing to admit it to myself yet. What Kevin and Tiffany never knew, what I had never told a soul, was that the story of the struggling, retired secretary was a carefully constructed fiction. It was the life I chose, not one I was forced into. My father was not a man of great education, but he was the hardest working man I ever knew. He was an immigrant who came to this country with nothing and built a successful construction company from the ground up. He was smart with his money, investing wisely in real estate and stocks. When he passed away 10 years ago, after a quiet funeral, he left me a significant inheritance. I'm not talking about a little nest egg. I'm talking about life-changing money, properties in Naples, Florida, a stock portfolio that my financial advisor called robust, and bank accounts that held more than Kevin would likely earn in his entire lifetime. But I never touched it. I never changed my life. I kept my little house in Columbus. I kept driving my 10-year-old Toyota. I kept working until I reached my retirement age. Why? Because I was terrified of what that money could do. I had seen it ruin families. More importantly, I wanted my son to love me for me. I wanted him to value me for the mother I was, for the sacrifices I made, not for the balance in my bank account. I wanted him to learn the dignity of work, to build his own life, to become a man of substance. What a catastrophic mistake that turned out to be. They saw my simple life not as a choice but as a weakness. They saw my careful budgeting not as principled, but as pitiful. Their greed started to show its ugly head long before the wedding. I remember about 6 months before they got engaged, they sat me down in my own living room with very serious faces. They had a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity. A tech startup a friend of Tiffany's was launching. They had a glossy brochure and a lot of buzzwords. All they needed was a co-signer for a substantial business loan. "It's just a formality, Mom," Kevin had said, avoiding my eyes. "With my salary and your good credit, it's a sure thing." Tiffany chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Think of it, Eleanor. This could set us up for life. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing in your old age." The implication was clear. They saw me as a financial burden they needed to manage. I'm no fool. I worked in a law firm for 40 years. I asked to see a detailed business plan, market analysis, financial projections. They looked at each other. Tiffany scoffed. "Oh, Eleanor, it's all very complicated tech stuff. You wouldn't understand. It's about trust. Don't you trust your own son?" I saw the flicker of disappointment in Kevin's eyes when I politely refused, explaining that I couldn't risk my home on something I didn't understand. Now I see it for what it was. It wasn't a test of trust. It was a test of my utility, a test I had failed in their eyes. They didn't want my wisdom or my love. They wanted my signature. They wanted my money. And when they couldn't get it the easy way, they decided I was no longer useful to them. That rejection, that dismissal of my value beyond a financial tool, was the moment they truly decided I didn't fit into the image of the life they wanted to build. A life built not on hard work, but on my hidden wealth, which they now planned to get their hands on one way or another. But as I sat in my hotel room that wedding night, I wasn't the pitiful old woman they thought I was. I was my father's daughter, and I was about to teach them a lesson about value that they would never forget. While they were dancing and drinking champagne, celebrating the beginning of their new life, I was quietly orchestrating its end. The plan I discussed with my lawyer, David, was not born of sudden anger, but of months of quiet, heartbreaking observation. It was a contingency plan, a last resort I had prayed I would never have to use. The first test came 3 days after the wedding. My phone rang and it was Kevin. There was no apology in his voice, no hint of remorse. It was the same casual, entitled tone he'd used with me for years. "Hey, Mom," he said, as if nothing had happened. "Tiff and I are heading to Cancun for the week. We need you to pop over to the apartment to water the plants and pick up the mail. Oh, and Tiffany said if you could do a little tidying up, that would be great. We're having people over when we get back." The sheer audacity of it left me speechless for a second. He had a stranger escort his mother from his wedding, and now he was asking me to be his maid. The old Eleanor would have swallowed her pain and said yes. But that Eleanor was gone. "No, Kevin," I said simply. There was a stunned silence. What do you mean, no?" "I mean I can't," I replied, my voice calm and even. "I'm busy. You'll have to find someone else." And I hung up the phone. It felt like breaking a chain I'd been wearing for 30 years. An hour later my phone rang again. This time it was Tiffany, and she was screaming. "What is wrong with you, Eleanor? Are you insane? After the disgusting scene you made at my wedding, it's the least you can do." "I made no scene, Tiffany," I responded, my voice as placid as a frozen lake. "I simply came to congratulate my son on his wedding day. A day I was not invited to." "Your son didn't want you there," she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. "Get it through your thick skull. You are a burden to him. A clingy, pathetic old woman. A burden." That word echoed in the quiet hotel room. After all the double shifts, the sleepless nights, the sacrificed dreams, I was a burden. A strange sense of peace washed over me. She had just given me the final confirmation I needed. "You know what, Tiffany?" I said, and I could hear her surprise at my conversational tone. "You're absolutely right. I have been a burden. That's why I've decided to free him from that burden forever. I'm retiring." "Retiring from what?" "Your non-existent job," she sneered. "No," I said softly. "I'm retiring from being a mother. As of this moment, Kevin no longer has one." I hung up and turned my phone off. It was time. My first calls were to the utility companies. "Yes, I'd like to remove my name and automatic payment information from the account at 123 Main Street." I told the representatives for the electric company, the gas company, and the water company. The account holder, Kevin Vance, will be taking over all payments immediately. My next call was to American Express. I was the primary account holder on a platinum card that Kevin had. Tiffany, of course, had a supplementary card and used it as her personal slush fund for designer bags and spa days. I had paid the balance thousands of dollars every single month without fail. "I'd like to report the cards for account number ending in 1005 as canceled," I told the agent. "Yes, immediately." "No, the account holders do not need to be notified by you. I'm sure they'll figure it out." They would return from their sun-drenched honeymoon in Cancun to a dark, cold apartment and a canceled credit card. It was a small, petty start, but I knew it was just the first domino, and I was about to push over the rest of them. They came back from Cancun with tans and cheap souvenirs, and walked straight into a wall of consequences. Kevin called me the evening they got back, his voice a mixture of confusion and fury. "Mom, the power is out at our apartment. Did you forget to pay the bill or something?" "No, Kevin, I didn't forget," I said calmly, picturing him standing in the dark. "I stopped paying it. It's your apartment, so it's your bill." "What are you talking about? You've always paid it." "It's your obligation," he shouted. "My obligation?" I repeated, and for the first time, a sliver of my own anger bled into my voice. "My only obligation was to raise you to be a decent human being. It seems I failed at that." Mothers are invited to their sons' weddings, Kevin. They are treated with respect. You made your choice at that reception gate. Now you get to live with the adult responsibilities that come with it. He was sputtering, speechless, but I wasn't finished. It was time to pull out the next support beam from his carefully constructed life. "And speaking of adult responsibilities," I continued, "you should probably start thinking about the rent." "The rent? I own that condo. I pay the mortgage," he yelled. "Do you, Kevin?" I asked softly. "Think back. Who paid the 20% down payment so you could avoid mortgage insurance? Who co-signed the loan because the bank said your salary alone wasn't enough? And who has been quietly paying half of that mortgage payment every month for the last 3 years directly to the bank, so you and Tiffany could afford your little getaways and her shopping sprees?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. He knew it was true. He had just chosen to ignore it. "My lawyer, David, will be in touch with you," I said coolly. "The property is legally in a trust that I control. You have been living there as a guest. Your guest status has been revoked. You'll have the option to sign a formal lease at market rate, or you can vacate the premises in 30 days. I hung up before he could respond. The final, most devastating blow had to be delivered with precision. I dialed the private line of Mr. Sterling, the CEO of the engineering firm where Kevin worked. Arthur Sterling and my father had been friends for 50 years. They'd built their businesses together. Two hardworking men who valued loyalty and integrity above all else. When Kevin graduated with his engineering degree, I had called Arthur as a favor. "Arthur, it's Eleanor Vance," I said. "Eleanor, it's wonderful to hear from you. How are you?" His warm voice boomed. "I've been better, Arthur, which is why I'm calling. It's about Kevin." His voice immediately became more serious. "Is everything all right?" "It's time for the training wheels to come off," I said, my voice firm. "For years you have protected him and overlooked his shortcomings as a favor to me. I am asking you to stop. Effective immediately, I want you to treat Kevin Vance as you would any other employee. I will no longer intercede for him. I want you to evaluate him based solely on his own merit." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. Eleanor, Arthur said gently, you know I will do as you ask. But I must be honest with you. If I do that, the boy is going to have serious problems. His work is mediocre at best. He's chronically late, and several clients have complained about his arrogant attitude. He's never even been considered for a promotion. The only reason he still has a job here is out of my respect for you and your father. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They were just facts. I understand completely, Arthur, I replied. Then I expect you to handle the situation as it should have been handled long ago. I hung up the phone. I had now taken away his power, his credit, his home, and his job security. He and Tiffany thought they had cast me out. They had no idea they had just exiled themselves from the very kingdom that I had built. In secret, all around them, they were about to find out what it was like to be truly on their own. And I suspected they wouldn't last a week. While Kevin was reeling from the collapse of his professional life, I decided it was time to pay Tiffany a personal visit. She worked as a sales associate at a high-end boutique in the Easton Town Center, one of those ridiculously expensive places where she could pretend to be part of a world she desperately wanted to belong to. It was the perfect stage for what I had in mind. The next afternoon, I had a car service drop me off at the entrance. I wasn't the retired secretary anymore. I was Eleanor Vance. I wore a classic Chanel suit I'd owned for years but rarely wore, paired with my mother's pearls and a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in decades. I walked into the boutique, the little bell above the door chiming softly. Tiffany was fawning over another customer, but her head snapped up when she heard the bell. When she saw me, her practiced, professional smile froze and then curdled into a look of pure loathing. She excused herself and marched over to me, her heels clicking angrily on the polished hardwood floor. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so other customers wouldn't hear. "Why, Tiffany, I'm here to shop," I said, my voice light and breezy. I let my eyes wander around the store. Isn't that what people do in a store? Or is your job just to stand around and look unpleasant? Her face flushed a deep, angry red. "You have no right to be here. This is my place of work. And you are an employee," I reminded her gently. "An employee whose job it is to assist customers. And I am a customer. A customer with money to spend. Now, are you going to help me? Or should I have a word with your manager about your unique approach to customer service?" Trapped, she had no choice. Through gritted teeth, she asked, "What do you want?" I smiled sweetly. "I'd like to see that dress in the window," I said, pointing to a stunning deep blue Oscar de la Renta gown. It was the most extravagant piece in the entire store. The $8,000 one. Her jaw practically hit the floor. She stared at me, then at the dress, then back at me. "8,000, she stammered. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm perfectly serious. Do you think I can't afford it?" I asked, enjoying the look of disbelief on her face. Muttering under her breath, she went to retrieve the dress. She held it out to me as if it were contaminated. "Here," she said with a sneer. "But you're wasting my time. There's no way you can afford this." I didn't even try it on. "It's lovely. I'll take it," I said. I walked to the counter and pulled my wallet from my purse. But I didn't pull out a regular credit card. I pulled out the American Express Centurion card. The black card. It's invitation only, and it made a satisfying thud as I placed it on the glass countertop. Tiffany just stared at it. She knew what it was. Her wealthy clients had them. She picked it up as if it might burn her. Her hands were trembling slightly as she ran the transaction. The machine beeped its approval instantly. As the receipt printed, she just stared at the slip, then at me, her mind clearly struggling to process what was happening. "How?" she whispered, speechless. "How can a poor, pathetic old woman like me afford this?" I finished for her, my voice dropping to a quiet, icy tone. "It's quite simple, Tiffany. It turns out I'm not poor. I never was." I took out my phone, opened my banking app, and placed it on the counter next to the receipt. She leaned in, her eyes scanning the screen. I watched as the color drained from her face. She saw the balance in just one of my checking accounts. A number with 7 figures. This can't be real," she stammered, backing away from the counter. "Oh, it's very real," I said, putting my phone and my new card away. That's just one account. I have properties my father left me. A stock portfolio. I have more money than your entire family will ever see. I just chose not to live like it. She looked utterly broken, her entire worldview shattering right there in front of the Chanel display. Why? She breathed. Why did you never say anything? I leaned in closer. Because I wanted my son to love me for who I am, not for what I have. I whispered, my voice filled with all the pain she had caused. But you and he made it very clear that to you I am worth nothing without it. So I decided it was time to show you both exactly what you've thrown away. I picked up the bag with my new dress. As I walked to the door, I paused and turned back to her. Oh, and one more thing, I said, my voice carrying across the silent store. Kevin is going to lose his job next week. And that condo you love so much? The eviction notice is on its way. I do hope you have some savings, Tiffany. You're going to need them. I walked out into the sunshine, leaving her standing there, a ghost in a temple of wealth she could now never hope to be a part of. I had expected tears, maybe a desperate phone call. What I got instead was a declaration of war. That night, Tiffany, backed into a corner and stripped of her delusions of grandeur, did what her generation does best. She took the fight to social media. She wrote a long, rambling post on Facebook, a masterpiece of manipulative fiction. She painted herself as the tragic heroine, the beautiful young bride whose life was being systematically destroyed by her psycho, narcissistic mother-in-law. She claimed I had been faking poverty for years to control Kevin, and now that he had found happiness with her, my jealousy had driven me to ruin them. She posted pictures of herself crying, artfully smudged mascara and all. She even posted photos of their apartment, which she had clearly trashed herself in a fit of rage, and claimed I had somehow been involved in harassing them. It was brilliant, in a sick, twisted way. She tagged every local news outlet, every community group in Columbus. And it worked. Initially, the post exploded. Within hours there were hundreds of comments. What a horrible monster. That poor young couple. Elderly abuse goes both ways. My name, Eleanor Vance, was being dragged through the digital mud. People who had never met me, who knew nothing about my life, were calling me evil, bitter, and deranged. It was a public lynching, and Tiffany was basking in the sympathy. She made one fatal mistake, however. In her haste to make me the villain, she used my full name. And while she was reaching an audience of strangers, she also reached the few people left who actually knew me. My phone started buzzing with messages from old colleagues and neighbors. Eleanor, have you seen this? It's libel. One wrote. I sat in the quiet of my hotel suite and read her post. Every word was a dagger. But as I read the comments, the vitriol from strangers, something inside me hardened. She had taken my private pain and turned it into a public spectacle. She wanted a show? I would give her one. I didn't engage on her post. I created my own. I didn't write with anger or emotion. I wrote with cold, hard facts. My name is Eleanor Vance, I began, and I am the psycho mother-in-law you have been reading about. Since my side of the story has been so creatively reimagined, allow me to provide some clarity with evidence. I told them everything. I told them about adopting a scared 3-year-old boy. I told them about the double shifts and the sacrifice dreams. I detailed with dates and amounts how I had been financially supporting their lifestyle for years. I posted redacted copies of the down payment check for their condo. I posted screenshots of the mortgage payments leaving my account. And then I delivered the killing blow. For the past year, I wrote, my son's fiancée has engaged in a pattern of verbal and emotional abuse. After being repeatedly gaslit and having my words twisted, my lawyer advised me, for my own legal protection, to document my interactions with them. Therefore, I have recordings. I attached a small audio file to the post. It was only 30 seconds long. It was the recording of the phone call from a few days prior. The world could now hear, in crystal clear audio, Tiffany's voice, shrill and filled with hate, screaming the words, "Get it through your thick skull. You are a burden to him." A clingy, pathetic old woman. The effect was instantaneous and seismic. The tide didn't just turn. It became a tsunami. People started sharing my post. The comments on Tiffany's original post shifted from sympathy to outrage. We've been played. one person wrote. She sounds like the real narcissist, another commented. People went back through her social media, finding old posts where she bragged about expensive gifts. Gifts they now knew I had paid for. Her web of lies was unraveling in real time, for the entire city to see. She had started a fire, thinking I would burn. She had no idea I was fireproof, and I had just brought the receipts, the recordings, and a tanker truck full of gasoline. The war was far from over, but I had just won the most important battle. And in her desperation, Tiffany was about to make her final catastrophic mistake, announcing she was going live on Instagram to clear her name. Tiffany's Instagram live started just as I knew it would. She appeared on screen, sitting on the floor of her messy living room, her face streaked with tears that looked remarkably well rehearsed. She framed the shot to show off some of the damage she had created, a broken picture frame strategically placed in the background. "Hi everyone," she began, her voice a pathetic whimper. I don't know what to do. My mother-in-law is trying to destroy my life, and she's using edited recordings and lies. I watched from the comfort of my plush hotel armchair, a cup of tea in my hand. The viewer count was climbing rapidly. 500, 1,000, 2,000. People were hungry for the drama. As she continued her performance, spinning a tale of woe and victimhood, I opened my own Instagram account. I found her live stream and typed a simple comment into the chat. "Hello, Tiffany. It's Eleanor. Since you're talking about me, perhaps you'll allow me to join the conversation and defend myself." The live chat, which had been a mix of sympathy and skepticism, exploded. "Let her in. OMG, she's here. If you're telling the truth, Tiffany, you have nothing to hide." Tiffany saw my comment. I watched her face pale on the screen. Panic flashed in her eyes. She was trapped. Her audience was turning on her. No, I'm not going to give her a platform to spread more lies," she stammered. The chat turned vicious. "Coward. Guilty." Finally, with a look of utter defeat, she sighed. "Fine," she said, trying to regain some composure. "Let her join. Let's all see the kind of person she really is." She tapped a button on her screen and suddenly my face appeared next to hers in a split screen. The contrast was stark and, I imagine, devastating for her. She was disheveled, crying, sitting on the floor of a trashed apartment. I was sitting upright, perfectly composed, dressed in a simple but elegant silk blouse, with the luxurious hotel suite visible behind me. "Hello, Tiffany," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Thank you for the invitation." "Just say what you have to say and go," she snapped. "I'd be happy to," I replied. "You claim my recordings are edited. Is that correct?" "Yes. You cut them up to make me sound bad." "That's a very serious accusation," I said. "So let's clear it up. I have here a longer recording. It's the full unedited phone call from the night you and Kevin announced your engagement party. The party you forgot to invite me to. In it, after I leave, you can be heard talking to Kevin. Would you like me to play it for the 10,000 people watching right now?" Her face went white. She knew exactly what was on that recording. "No. That's an invasion of privacy." "Is it?" I countered. "Or is it evidence? Evidence of you telling my son, and I quote, 'Once we get that inheritance money, we can finally put her in a nice home and be done with her.' You also mentioned something about getting power of attorney. Do you remember that, Tiffany?" The live chat went into an absolute frenzy. She started crying for real now, big ugly sobs. "You're a monster," she choked out. "No, Tiffany," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. "I'm a mother who was pushed too far. You claim I meddled in your marriage. Please give everyone watching one specific example of me meddling." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She couldn't because there were none. "You see," I continued, "you never saw me as family. You saw me as an obstacle in a bank account. You never wanted a mother-in-law. You wanted a sponsor." I then held up a stack of papers to the camera. "For everyone watching, this is the deed to the condo they live in. As you can see, my name is on it as the primary owner of the trust. These are the bank statements showing the mortgage payments from my account. And these are the credit card statements for the past 2 years, showing the thousands of dollars spent on designer clothes, vacations, and dinners, all paid for by the poor, pathetic old woman you've heard so much about. Tiffany wasn't even trying to speak anymore. She was just staring at the screen, defeated. This was never about jealousy, Tiffany, I said, my voice firm and clear, addressing not just her but everyone watching. This was about respect. A respect I gave freely and was denied at every turn. You didn't ban me from a wedding. You banned me from a life I single-handedly funded. And now the funding is over. I looked directly into my phone's camera. The show is over, I said. Then I tapped the leave button, and my half of the screen went black, leaving her alone, crying, exposed to the judgment of thousands of strangers. The fallout from the live stream was immediate and brutal. It was like a bomb had gone off in the middle of their carefully curated lives, and the shrapnel hit everything. The video clips went viral. Mother-in-law obliterates style with receipts was one headline. My face was everywhere. But I wasn't the villain anymore. I was a hero to disgruntled parents everywhere. The next morning, Tiffany was called into her manager's office at the boutique. She was fired on the spot. Our brand is about luxury and elegance, her manager told her coolly. Your public behavior has been anything but. You are a liability we cannot afford. Kevin's fate was sealed just as quickly. Mr. Sterling called him into his office that afternoon. The public humiliation was one thing, but several of the firm's major clients, many of whom were older family men and women themselves, had seen the video. They had called Mr. Sterling directly, saying they were uncomfortable having a man who treated his mother with such profound disrespect managing their projects. Kevin was given a small severance package and shown the door. His career, the one I had gifted him, was over. The official eviction notice from my lawyer arrived the next day. They had 30 days to vacate the property or begin paying the full market rate rent of $3,000 a month. Money they no longer had. Their world, once padded with my money and my connections, had shrunk to the size of their own meager abilities. Their so-called friends, the ones who had flocked to their parties and complimented Tiffany's designer bags, vanished like mist. No one wanted to be associated with them. I, on the other hand, was overwhelmed with messages of support. Women from all over the country shared their own stories of ungrateful children and family heartbreak. I had inadvertently started a movement. A local news station asked for an interview, which I politely declined. This was never about fame. It was about justice. The final nail in the coffin of their life together came about a week later. I was eating a quiet breakfast in my hotel room when my phone rang. It was Kevin. His voice was broken, unrecognizable. "Mom," he whispered. "Please. You've won. Just stop." "I have done nothing but tell the truth, Kevin," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "You and Tiffany are the ones who created this mess with your lies." "Tiffany's a mess," he sobbed. "She blames me for everything. She says I should have been able to control you." "And what do you think?" I asked. There was a long pause, and then he said the words that would sever the final, frayed thread of my affection for him forever. I think if I had just known you had the money, none of this would have happened. We could have been a happy family. I would never have treated you like that if I had known." My blood ran cold. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. All this time, a tiny foolish part of my heart had hoped that he was just misguided, manipulated by Tiffany. But this was the truth. The ugly, rotten core of his character laid bare. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about respect. It was never about me, the woman who raised him. It was about my wallet. My value to my own son was a dollar amount. And because he thought that amount was zero, so was I. He had just confessed that his love and respect were for sale. And in his eyes, I had not been able to afford them. That revelation was more painful than being banned from his wedding, more humiliating than any of Tiffany's insults. It was the moment I knew my son was truly gone. I let his words hang in the air between us, heavy and toxic. "Do you hear yourself, Kevin?" I finally asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Are you actually telling me that your respect for me, your own mother, was conditional on my bank balance?" He started to backtrack immediately, the way a child does when caught in a lie. "No, Mom, that's not what I meant. I meant things would have been different. We wouldn't have been so stressed about money." "Stop lying." I cut him off, and the words were like shards of ice. "For once in your life, stop lying to me and to yourself. You meant exactly what you said. You would have been the perfect, loving son if you thought there was a multi-million-dollar inheritance waiting for you. You would have smiled and brought me flowers and endured my presence, all while waiting for me to die so you could cash in. He was crying now, loud, heaving sobs. That's not true. Isn't it? I pressed on, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. You looked me in the eye on your wedding day and treated me like garbage you wanted scraped off your shoe. That was you, Kevin. Not Tiffany's influence. Not stress about money. That was your true character shining through because you thought I was worthless. You thought I had nothing left to give you, so you threw me away. I continued, the words pouring out of me, a torrent of 30 years of buried pain. I didn't work double shifts so you could have a mother who was rich. I did it so you could have a mother who was present. I didn't give up my dreams so you could have an easy life. I did it so you could have the tools to build a meaningful one. I gave you everything that mattered, my time, my unconditional love, my unwavering support. And you valued none of it. You stood by and watched your fiancée mock me. You allowed her to destroy my memories, and you chose her over me at every single turn. That wasn't a financial decision, Kevin. That was a moral one. He was whispering now, just a string of, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sure you are sorry now, I said. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the money is gone. You're sorry your life is a wreck. But you are not sorry for hurting me. You are only sorry for the consequences. That was the crux of it. His regret was selfish. It was born of his own misery, not of any empathy for mine. What do I have to do to fix this? He pleaded, his voice cracking. What can I do for you to forgive me? And that's when I knew with absolute certainty what I had to do. Nothing, I said, and the word was strangely peaceful. There is nothing you can do, Kevin. Because forgiveness is for people who make mistakes. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You showed me who you are. And I believe you. Mom, please. I am not your mother anymore, I said softly. You made that clear. The woman who raised you, who loved you more than her own life. You killed her at the gate of your wedding. You are speaking to a stranger now. I hung up the phone, and for the first time since that horrible day, I allowed myself to weep. I didn't cry for the son I had lost. I cried for the son I realized had never truly existed in the first place. The loving boy I remembered was just a ghost, and I had spent my entire life loving a memory. The grief was immense, but underneath it, for the first time, I felt the faint, unfamiliar flutter of freedom. 6 months later, the Ohio winter was a distant memory. I was sitting on the porch of my new home in Charleston, South Carolina, a cup of coffee in my hand, watching the morning sun dance on the gentle waves of the Atlantic. I had sold the little house in Columbus, the place that held so many ghosts, and bought a beautiful, light-filled house by the sea. I was finally living the life my father's hard work had afforded me, a life of peace and quiet dignity. The legal battles were over. My defamation lawsuit against Tiffany had concluded. The judge, after reviewing the evidence and the viral video of our live stream, had ruled decisively in my favor. Tiffany was ordered to pay a significant sum in damages and to issue a formal public apology. The apology she posted was brief, clinical, and clearly written by her lawyer, but it served its purpose. She acknowledged her statements were false, and that they had damaged my reputation. I never saw a penny of that money. I had David donate the entire settlement to a national charity that provides legal aid and support for single mothers and adoptive families. It was never about the money for me, it was about the principle. From what I heard through David, their lives had completely unraveled. Unable to pay the rent, they were evicted from the condo. The shame and public humiliation were too much for their fragile marriage, which had been built on a foundation of status and money. Their divorce was finalized a few months after they lost the house. Tiffany, stripped of her wealthy husband fantasy, reportedly moved back in with her parents in another state, deleted her social media, and vanished from public life. Kevin, I was told, was working a lower-paying job as a technician for a small cable company. He was living in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. He was finally paying his own bills, living within his own means, a harsh lesson in humility he should have learned decades ago. He was alone, having alienated the only person who had ever truly been in his corner. My life, in contrast, was blooming. I had started taking painting classes, a lifelong dream I had put on hold to raise Kevin. My canvases were filled with vibrant seascapes, not the muted tones of my old life. I volunteered at a local library, reading stories to children, their innocent faces a balm to my weary soul. I made new friends, women my age who were vibrant and interesting, who valued me for my conversation and my laughter, not for what I could do for them. I started writing. At first it was just journaling, a way to process the trauma and the grief. But as I wrote, I realized my story was not just my own. The thousands of messages I had received proved that. It was the story of millions of women, mothers and wives who had given everything of themselves to their families, only to be taken for granted, to be rendered invisible. I decided to write a book, to give a voice to all the silent sacrifices, to all the women who needed to be reminded that their worth was not dependent on their usefulness to others. I had found a new purpose, one that had been forged in the fires of betrayal. I was no longer just Kevin's mother. I was Eleanor, and I was finally getting to know her. About a year after I moved to Charleston, a thick envelope arrived from David's office. Inside was a handwritten letter, forwarded from Kevin. It was the first direct contact he had attempted since our final devastating phone call. My first instinct was to tear it up, to throw it in the fire. But curiosity, or perhaps some lingering vestigial maternal instinct, made me open it. His handwriting, which I had once taught him how to form, was shaky. The letter was long, rambling, and stained with what looked like tears. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for the house back. He didn't even ask for forgiveness, not directly. He just told me about his life. He told me about the lonely nights in his small apartment, the crushing weight of his mistakes, the public shame that followed him like a shadow. He wrote that he had started going to therapy. For the first time, he was being forced to look at himself, at the man he had become, without the buffer of my money or my unconditional support. And he was horrified by what he saw. "I spent my whole life taking from you," he wrote. "I took your time, your money, your dreams. I just took and never once stopped to think about the cost to you. I thought it was what mothers did. I thought it was my right. Tiffany didn't make me into a monster, Mom. She just gave the monster inside me permission to come out. The truth is, I threw you away because I was weak, and your constant quiet strength was a mirror I couldn't bear to look into. It showed me everything I wasn't." The last paragraph was the one that stuck with me. "I know I don't deserve to even speak your name. I destroyed the best thing in my life for nothing. I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I know that's impossible. I'm writing because I wanted you to know, wherever you are, that I finally understand. You were the best mother a son could ever hope for, and I was too blind and too stupid to see it until I had lost you forever." I folded the letter and sat with it on my porch for a long time, watching the tide roll in. I felt a profound sadness, a deep, aching grief for the little boy I had loved so fiercely. But there was no anger left. There was no desire for more revenge. There was just a quiet, somber peace. His understanding didn't change anything, but it validated everything. It confirmed that my painful decision to walk away had been the right one. It was the only thing that could have ever forced him to grow up. I never replied to that letter. What was there to say? The bridge between us had been burned, and I had no desire to rebuild it. I wished him well, truly. I hoped he would find his own way, that he would build a life of integrity on the ashes of the one he had destroyed. But his journey was his own now. It no longer had anything to do with me. My journey was here in the sun, with the sound of the ocean and a blank canvas waiting for me. I had learned the hardest lesson of my life at 71 years old. That unconditional love does not require unconditional suffering. You can love someone with your whole heart and still choose to love yourself more. My career as a mother was over. It had ended in heartbreak and ruin. But my life, my real life as Eleanor Vance, a painter, a volunteer, a friend, a free woman, that life was just beginning. And the ultimate revenge, I discovered, isn't causing misery to others. It's finding your own happiness, your own peace, and finally living for yourself. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. It wasn't easy to share, but I know so many of you have faced your own heartbreaks. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone who feels taken for granted by their own family? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. You are not alone.